Ukrainian officials say at least 3 people have been killed by Russian missile strikes in the western part of the country. More than a dozen others were hurt in those attacks. The cities of Lutsk and Lviv suffered significant damage. Those cities are hundreds of miles from the front line of the war. Our foreign correspondent Debora Patta is in Ukraine for us, and as you see, joins us now to talk about what's happening. Debora, what more can you tell us about the damage from this latest missile attack on Ukraine?
Well, Russian forces fired more than 24 missiles across Ukraine in the very early hours of this morning. And as you pointed out, what's unusual about this is that they hit 2 cities in the western part of the country, far, far from the front lines. According to Ukraine's Air Force, there were at least 28 cruise missiles, 16 of which were intercepted. Now, at an industrial facility in the city of Lutsk in the northwest, about 55 miles from the Polish border, at least 3 people were killed. Also very badly hit the city of Lviv, where a missile landed in the yard of a kindergarten and near apartment blocks, which sparked a fire, damaging more than 100 homes, according to the city's mayor. And you should note that places like Lviv, which is a very beautiful and historic city in Ukraine, have become a haven for people wanting to get as far away as they can from the front line fighting. But Russia periodically shatters that sense of security with the kind of attacks that we saw today. And in fact, just before we went on air, another air raid siren sounded out here in Kyiv, warning of possible attacks. So they continue.
Debora, the U.S. is sending $200 million worth of security aid to Ukraine. How is that going to be used?
Well, in the light of this morning's attack, the Biden administration's announcement will come as very, very good news for Ukraine because it includes air defense munitions to help them counter the kind of attacks we saw this morning, as well as other equipment to help Ukraine in its now 3-month-long counteroffensive against Russia. Because equally important is the U.S. is sending mine-clearing equipment and demolition munitions. Ukraine's defense minister has said that this is the most heavily mined country in the world. It's difficult to assess exactly how accurate that is, but it's certainly up there with the worst. Estimates vary, but the territory affected is believed to be twice the size of the state of Indiana. And some of those mines might have been put there by Ukrainian forces, but most of them are Russian, and countless further mines are being dug into Ukraine's soil, distributed across fields, forests, from the air, or blasted into position by rockets every hour of every single day. So those interceptions and rocket clearing mechanisms are going to be the landmine clearing mechanisms are going to be very important.
And Debora, we all continue to wonder what the off-ramp could potentially be for Russian President Vladimir Putin since he started this war of choice, really. I know he addressed the Moscow Conference on International Security earlier. What did he have to say?
Well, this conference comes at a very pivotal point for Russia. You're talking about an exit point, as its currency has all but collapsed. It was billed as its annual security event. It's basically shoring up Russia's military alliances outside of the West. As those sanctions bite, Vladimir Putin, Errol, needs all the friends he can get. He spoke at the conference online, not in person as usual, even though the conference was in Moscow, and he repeated his accusation that NATO continues, and I'm quoting here, to build up its potential by using military and non-military pressure. And he also described Ukraine as an example of what he called the policy of pouring oil on fire, implying that the West is trying to inflame the conflict in Ukraine and draw other countries into it. But as I said, this conference takes place against Russia's currency crisis. Yesterday, the ruble dropped to its lowest point against the dollar since the start of its war against Ukraine, falling below the 100 mark, making it worth, listen to this, less than 1 cent. That's a 40% decrease in its value this year alone. And this resulted in a dramatic move by Russia's central bank, which then raised the interest rates by 3.5 percentage points. Of course, that then raises the question of what it means for Putin's capacity to wage his war non-stop and ongoing. He could, of course, cut back on spending, say, to his armed forces. There's a suggestion. But in all likelihood, it's going to be civilians who will bear the pain, as we've seen with these high interest rates and the rising inflation, Errol.
Debora, thank you so much.
Thank you, Debora.
you.